we've had taglines along the way. When we started the forum, I think our tagline was helping organizations that invest in youth, invest in change. And then we moved along to moving ideas to impact when our board told us to get grounded and get focused and get results. And then this idea that we had to actually talk to people about not just youth development, but give them an end point of ready by 21, ready for college, ready for work, ready for life. As you did this work in communities, why was it important to have that kind of a new focal point to continue to galvanize partnerships and galvanize planning?
I think with the other kind of similar idea in the forum was the idea that it was a forum, and that this idea of kind of allied youth fields or across the youth fields, and we've talked about this a little bit in the college. It's all the different places and spaces where young people spend their time, and how are you helping people look at all of those places and spaces and in the lives of young people. And the Ready by 21 work really started with this idea of, and we talked about it on our last conversation together, how are you not just helping individual young people beat the odds, but how are you changing the odds for all of the children and youth in your community? What does that look like to change the odds for all the children and youth in this country? And to do that, how do you really understand the landscape of the current community that you have? Community is perfectly designed to get the results you're currently seeing. So how do you understand the landscape of family, school, community supports? And then what are we going to do about it as leaders? And so the Ready by 21 work was really going through that theory of change of how do you really help leaders work together more effectively in order to change that landscape and change the response and be able to ultimately change the odds for children and youth. So we started working with leaders, and when we think about leaders, it was leaders broadly defined in all levels of the work and starting off in all places. And in our first Ready by 21 learning group, we had everything from a school superintendent in a rural community in California to the governor's office, children's cabinet with the state of Maryland, to an intermediary in Columbus, Indiana, just a real range of leaders, and what they came together around we're trying to take this big picture approach. We're trying to move these ideas. We're trying to see what it would take in our community or our state to make sure that all young people are ready by 21. We've moved further along the age continuum now, but what does it take to really do that? And with the power that we carry, what can we do to be able to move that in our communities? I think one of the key things about the Ready by 21 work and ideas all along the way is that those boundary spanners that you mentioned can be found in many places, and they often change jobs over time as well. So how do you support them in the work they're doing if they're the kind of leaders that can really galvanize others to work together?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and you're reminding me of a lot of history, and the fact that first Ready by 21 learning group really was a diverse group of boundary spanners who were sitting in rural school districts and United Ways, and and sitting inside of government, sitting inside of youth development intermediaries. They really were leveraging from wherever they were sitting this idea of building this broader partnership table and having that table really stick together with this broader vision. As you described, that it can't just be about one outcome. It can't just be about one age group, and it really can't just be about one system or setting. We've got to have this set of shared goals, and we have to really figure out some way, which we didn't have then, of looking at and pulling back and doing this. We used to talk about zooming in and zooming out to say, really, how well is this community doing? And I remember some of the power of these very simple tools. We were just asking people to use a coloring book, really. It was pretty much that simple. And color in these matrices, red, yellow, green. Do you think you're doing better for little kids or big kids? Do you think you're doing better in the academic space versus the social space versus the health space? And folks were finding this group exercise of comparing where they thought things were in their community quite valuable. And so I think the early idea, and you can talk a little bit more about this, that in order for these ideas to get sticky, we had to find simple, creative ways for people to play with them. And so the tools, when we talked to Kim last week, or a couple weeks ago, Kim Robinson from the Weichert Center, the other of the three executive vice presidents, The Weicker Center now has these incredibly sophisticated, evaluated, evidence-based, continuous quality improvement tools. You have really been finding tools to help people play with ideas. So they're not, they don't need a validated tool to assess the quality of their program. They are really just trying to find ways to literally get on the same page with their ideas. So Ready by 21 was one of those things that we had to put out there, just a simple idea. You can't stop at 18. Because so many of the policies just stopped at 18. And when you were working with some of these groups, we had to find a way to push them. But anything else about the simple tools that you put together early on, and I know we'll get into some more sophisticated ones, that really help people get around a table and play to see how their thinking was influencing their decision making?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that because there were simple conversation starters in a way, and ways that people brought their own, in some ways, their perception data of what was happening in their communities as a starting point for those conversations, and we'd help them do that. It did get into more detail, like how do you do outcomes-focused strategic planning and community-wide processes that really focus on community engagement. It's sort of where it evolved to. But I think about that zoom out, zoom in that you were talking about, and we would do these, and so we'd map in how well do you think your young people are doing, where do you think the resources and attention are going. Sometimes there would be actual surveys and things behind it. Sometimes it was the in the room kind of build the picture, but it would just take age group by those different outcome areas and have people map it out. And then we'd have this classic moment. Maybe it's just how strategic planning happened or used to happen. This classic moment where folks would say, okay, now we've looked at this whole picture and we've scanned everything, we've looked at our data and like that. And now what we need to do is like pick something, right? So we see that, red lights going off here and over here, we're not doing well in some of these areas. So we just need to pick one, or maybe like pick three, right? We're just going to zoom in and pick something. And then we'd hear time and again from folks like, we did that. And then something else came up on the radar screen. Maybe it was childhood obesity. Maybe it was something that was happening around grade level reading that we were off of. Something else came up because we were all looking over here. And then we have to go like do the whole scan again. And so our encouragement to folks in terms of the big picture approach was, as you're picking as you're saying you have to pick three, let at least one of those things be zooming out and having some way to keep the overall radar screen in focus, so that as things change, and they change rapidly, we've all been through this past year, but you think about the community level, things just change over time. The idea is to be able to see the change as it's happening and be able to, with all the relationships you've built, respond to that changing reality for the young people in your community, and have them involved in bringing about that change as well. So I think that's the kind of thing that in some ways we still use. It's a simple thought, and we can use it in different levels of complexity, but those dashboards for youth that were the starting tool became really core to the strategic planning work of how do you keep a big picture in focus while you're actually still zooming in on some parts to really get some traction and make a difference.